Hey guys, I'm Andrew Henderson from Nomad Capitalist, nomadcapitalist.com here in Kuala Lumpur. Interesting thing happened when I posted my video talking about U.S. citizenship renunciation and sharing my experience. And a lot of people ask the question, well, what passport do you travel on now? I may talk about that in a future video, and there's a nuanced answer there. So if you haven't subscribed to our channel, make sure you subscribe and check out all the videos, including me talking about that in the near future. But there is one passport program that I've talked about going through before. I've talked about the Comoros Citizenship by Investment Program. The Comoros is definitely a Tier C passport. And so a lot of people are asking, well, hold on, we just know that you have this one Tier C passport. And how are you getting around the world? How are you the nomad capitalist if you're traveling around as a Comorian? That ain't getting you anywhere. And so it brings up the question, could one renounce U.S. citizenship or any other Tier A citizenship on a Tier C passport? Now, fortunately, the Comoros is not the only passport that I travel on, so I do have other access. But let me walk you through this situation, because I think that the flip side of the question is, do I need a Tier A passport to replace my U.S. passport if my goal is U.S. citizenship renunciation? Or again, if for some reason you want to renounce Australia, do I need some other Tier A passport to replace Australia or Canada or whatever? I definitely think that people go overboard with the idea that they need a Tier A passport. In fact, we've talked in another video where I talked about why Tier B passports, ones that get you into the EU but not the US visa-free, are actually the wave of the future because they come with a lot less baggage. But can you travel on only a Tier C passport? Potentially, yes. For me, the sweet spot is that Tier B. If you have visa-free access to the EU, you probably have visa-free access to a certain number of other countries. That gives you relatively good visa-free travel. If you build a relatively good passport portfolio, even of just 2 passports, you can probably go to pretty much everywhere in the world of consequence except for the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and perhaps a few other countries like Thailand, South Africa, Morocco, etc. Now, let's talk about Tier C passport. Obviously, one thing that we don't often take into account is the fact that most people in the world want to stay in one place. And so if that's you, then a Tier C passport could work. For example, I'm in Malaysia right now. Comorians and pretty much every other Tier C passport holder in the world have some kind of access, usually 30 days access visa-free to Malaysia. Then, from there, you can go and you can apply for the Malaysian My Second Home program, where you deposit some money in the bank and you get a residence permit good for 10 years. If your goal is to stay in Malaysia, travel to Singapore, travel to Hong Kong, travel to Macau, travel to the Philippines, travel to Indonesia, stay in this Southeast Asia region, travel to Myanmar, India as well, then the Comoros passport is just fine. You'll have trouble, as we talked about in a different video, getting a Thai visa if you want to go to Thailand. The Chinese might look at you a little bit funny if you want to go to China, but you've got access to a lot of countries in Southeast Asia. And so I've talked about the Comoros passport as being an interesting kind of fill-in-the-gaps passport because it does have access to places like Hong Kong that some European non-EU passports don't have. So step 1, if your goal is to stay in one place and just get a residence permit, Tier C could work. Plenty of countries that offer residence permits, whether you want 1 home, 2 homes, 3 homes. In some cases, it's just a matter of buying some real estate that you'd want to live in anyway. In some cases, it's putting money in the bank. Whatever the case may be, most countries aren't really that particular. If you have a Comoros passport or some other Tier C passport, come on in. Now, the second thing is if you want more travel privileges, one thing you can do is looking at augmenting a Tier C passport with some kind of regional residence permit. And obviously the biggest region that offers travel throughout the most number of countries is the Schengen area in Europe. And so there are a number of different investment migration programs, not passport programs, but residency programs, some which may lead to a passport and aren't always worth it for everybody. Others which will not probably lead to a passport or it definitely won't lead to a passport, but at least allow you to live there for 5 years, 10 years at a time. These are generally temporary residents, but there's one that I'm aware of that's instant permanent residence. And so this is actually interesting because if you have a T or C passport, not only can you go to 40, 50, 60 countries, sometimes more, but now you're adding these, I guess about 30 countries in the Schengen area and Schengen adjacent that you can go to. And you're adding, of course, some of the most popular countries to visit in the world to your list. And so if you want to spend part of your time living in Europe, part of your time living in Malaysia, or traveling around Southeast Asia, going to Panama, for example, Ecuador, countries that allow T or C passport holders in, Nicaragua generally does as well, you could really distribute your time very well. You have the EU residence permit to easily fly through the EU. Another interesting thing that EU temporary residence and permanent residence on an even bigger scale offers is it gets you into some countries visa-free. For example, Ethiopia, Serbia are just two of a handful of countries that if you have a T or C passport that doesn't give you visa-free, but you have TR or PR in the EU, depends on the country in some cases, but you can actually get visa-free access to other countries using your permanent residence. So you actually get additional visa-free just by holding that residence permit. So a second option is getting a T or C passport and then just adding on an EU residence permit. The EU in general is pretty open to people coming from anywhere. If you have the money, even many countries are pretty open to Iranians. It's generally relatively straightforward, and they don't necessarily judge you the same way that the United States or Australia or Canada might judge you. The third strategy that I think is important when asking, this hypothetical question, could I renounce on a T or C passport, is understanding that there are some T or C passports that are actually not that bad. One that we talked about recently in a video I talked about passports I would buy if I won the lottery is Turkey. And people say, oh, the Turkish passport's not that good. It's not worth it. Well, it's not worth the money, and even Turkey knows that now. They've acknowledged that they overpriced it. But a Turkish passport isn't that terrible. If you do kind of the belt and suspenders where you combine a Turkish citizenship, which is T or C, along with an EU residence permit, which gets you basically into T or B without having to hold the passport, Turkey has access to over 100 countries visa-free, which is well above the T or C average. You can go to Malaysia for 90 days. You can go to a lot of the countries in the region. You can go to a lot of places. I think they even get it's not visa-free to Mexico, which is a tough one to get into, but they have a little bit of an easier time. So there are a lot of countries that Turks can go to. The biggest thing that they're missing is Europe. If you added access to the Schengen area to a Turkish passport visa-free list, you'd actually have a pretty darn good passport. Russia is similar. Russians can go to Thailand, Russians can go to South Africa, Russians can go to a lot of countries that are difficult for the average, even T or B passport holder to go to. And of course, they can also go to Russia, which is a hard country to get into for many people. There are some T or C passports. Now, Russia is a relatively difficult one to get without a lot of effort. Turkey, you can go and get one relatively quickly by putting money in the bank, hiring people, starting a business, investing in real estate. So I think that understanding that there are some T or C passports that actually aren't that bad, the reason that they're T or C is merely because they're missing the EU. And if you have the money to get a T or C passport by economic means, then you can simply go and add the EU passport by investing anywhere from $250,000 to €500,000 in most cases in one of the various EU investment residence programs, and basically do the belt and suspenders approach. So those are three ways where you could theoretically be cool with being a T or C citizen. I definitely think that obviously it's good to have a passport portfolio. It's not that difficult to get a T or B passport if you're gonna be spending the money. Again, if you're gonna do Turkey for $1 million, why not do something in the Caribbean for $100,000 or $150,000? But theoretically it could work. Would I do it? Probably not, just considering that the economics can be done better in other ways. But I think that it's important to understand that not everything is cut and dry. And when it comes to looking at your passport portfolio, T or C may not be something bad to look at, It just so happens that some of the ones that are easy to get happen to be overpriced. If you want to find out more about second passports, how to get one, how they work, what all the tiers are about, definitely subscribe to our channel. Figure out how to build your passport portfolio, how to become a citizen of the world. And if you want some help and you want more detailed strategies on how to get this done for yourself, that's when you go to nomadcapitalist.com.